Franchising is one of those topics that a lot of people are interested in learning more about, but the information that is readily available for the people wanting to learn about it is very few and far between. There isn't a whole lot of information out there for people wanting to learn more about franchising, and because of that, I feel as though there's a lot of misinformation that goes around in the franchise industry. And so today in this video, I'm going to be talking about what you must know before you become a franchisee. So let's get started. Now, to give you some background information, I have nonchalantly mentioned on this channel about my past in franchising. And interestingly enough, franchising is probably the industry I know most about, and yet it is the industry that I speak the least about on this channel, and there are a number of reasons for that that I'm not going to get into on this video. I have been in franchising in some way, shape, or form since I was 21 years old. I dropped out of college and then moved to Chicago to work with a franchisee there that had successful multi-unit franchise brands. Once I came back from Chicago, I opened up a franchise of my own at 23. I ran that franchise for a while, and now I work on the consulting side of franchising. So I have been really in every aspect of franchising in my entire 6-year-long career. Because of that, I've learned a lot about the industry, I've learned a lot about the do's and don'ts, and I've also learned a lot about the things that people just simply get wrong about the franchise industry as a whole. So I want to talk to you guys about the things that you must know before you pursue a franchise. He knows that he is not supposed to be up here, but today I guess, I don't know, maybe it's Labor Day, he thinks it's a special occasion. So he can stay up today, but typically he's not allowed on this couch. And I also want to note that these are my personal opinions on the franchise industry and on what you should know if you want to be a franchise. This does not reflect any of the views on the companies that I work with or the companies that I work for. They are just my personal opinion from somebody who was a franchisee and has worked in the franchise industry for a long time. The number one most important thing that you need to remember if you're looking at opening up a franchise is the fact that franchising isn't passive. It is not a passive source of income, at least in my opinion, it's not. Now, it can be passive, but I don't think it's inherently a passive source of income. In my view, I think a passive source of income is something that you can just set it and forget it. You don't need to worry about it. The income just comes in. A passive source of income would be like royalty payments that you get from a product that you invented. It would be dividend payments. It would be things like that. You don't have to do any bit of excess work in order to get that source of income. And franchising is simply not that route. Now, with franchising, there are kind of two routes that you can go down as far as your passiveness or your involvement in the business. You can be an owner-operator, or you can be an absentee owner. And the difference between these two types of owners are really big. They have different time commitment levels that you need for the business, and there is also different levels of profitability that you can get with these two types of ownership. A owner-operator is somebody that is in their business day in and day out. They are essentially the GM of the franchise. And whenever you're an owner and operator of a franchise, you are essentially buying yourself a job, and you would collect a salary through that business. Whereas an absentee owner is somebody that is more like an investor. They buy the franchise, they pay to have it built, but then they hire a GM, and they are not in the store day in and day out. The time commitment of these two is vastly different. The time commitment of the owner-operator is going to be huge. You're going to need to be in that store 60 to 70 hours a week easily. Whereas the time commitment of an absentee owner is much smaller. You could potentially maybe dedicate 5 to 10 hours a week to that business. But that is where profitability comes into play. With the owner-operator scenario, you have a higher profit potential because of the fact that you are not paying a GM to run your store for you. You are the GM, and you're collecting a salary from the business. And so whenever you're an owner-operator, not only do you get kind of the benefits of the profit as an owner, but you also get the salary of the GM as well. And so there is more money that can go into your pocket at the end of the day. Whereas if you are a absentee owner, not only do you need to collect your return as an investor and as an owner of that business, but you also have to pay your GM. And typically, depending on what type of franchise you own, a GM salary could be anywhere from $40,000 to as much as $80,000, depending on what type of business it is. And that really does get into the bottom line profitability of your business. But regardless of what type of owner you want to be for your franchise, it's important to understand that franchising is inherently not a passive form of income. You, of course, can make it passive, and over time it can become more and more passive, but I just think that the time commitment that is required to get a franchise up and running is as far as passive as you can get. And if you're somebody who's wanting to look for a truly passive form of income, franchising is simply not the route you should go down. My next piece of advice is kind of on the same thought process, and I may be beating a dead horse at this point, but I really want to drive home the fact that franchising is not like a turn on the lights and start collecting money form of a business. It really does require a lot of work. And I feel like there's a common misconception in franchising that because of the fact that it's a proven business model, all you have to do is build the place up, hire your staff, and then it's good to go. And that really isn't the case. You really do have to be on top of your numbers. You have to be on top of your profit margins. You have to be on top of your team. And because of that, it really can make the business quite hard. And so I do think that a lot of times franchises fail because people go into it with unrealistic expectations. They go into it thinking that they can run their franchise on the side and then do a full-time job on the other 40 hours a week, or they can just do it and only go into the store or the franchise once a month. And that simply isn't the case. You are setting yourself up for failure if this is the thought process that you have when approaching the idea of becoming a franchisee. Being a franchisee and opening up a franchise, regardless of what industry you're in, whether you're in food, hospitality, industrial, whatever the case is, opening up a franchise is a lot of work. It is a lot of work. It requires a lot of time. It requires a lot of energy, and it requires a lot of patience. And there is far too many people out there that go into franchising expecting it to be this turnkey operation where you turn the key and then it goes and then now you have your own personal ATM. And that really is not the case. I think that this mindset is really harmful to the franchise industry as a whole because these types of franchisees, the franchisees that expect for it to be easy, are the ones that ultimately fail and then give franchises a bad name. You can be super successful owning a franchise, but you have to be able to go into it with the right mindset. And that's the mindset of understanding that it isn't going to be a passive source of income, that it's not going to be this turnkey thing, and that you are going to have to put a lot of work into it. My next tip for you is in regards to choosing a franchise and how to go about choosing a franchise. This is something that I see a lot online. And this is where bad advice comes into play most often, I think, because whenever people are choosing a franchise, I think so often they default to the ones that they know of. And so often that's Subway. So many people recommend looking into Subway as a franchise, and I don't really know why, because Subway is not a good franchise model. You see, with Subway, the $5 footlong really killed the profit margins with Subway. I know a number of Subway operators who have dozens of locations. In fact, I personally know somebody that has over 50 Subway locations. And whenever the $5 footlong came out, they completely lost their profit margin on that product, and they were relying on the other menu items to keep their brand afloat. And then whenever the entire Jared Fogle incident happened a few years back, that killed it even more. So Subway has been kind of riddled with scandals over the last few years, between introducing the $5 footlong that killed profit margin to then having their spokesperson be involved in really horrible criminal activities. This really hurt franchisees. I would absolutely not recommend ever looking into going into Subway as a franchisee. I think that maybe at one point in time it was a good investment, but right now in 2020, stay far, far away. The next one, as far as recommendations go, that I hear a lot about is about Chick-fil-A and getting into Chick-fil-A as an owner and a franchisee. And Chick-fil-A is actually really unique because their franchise structure is unlike anything else in the franchise industry. The way that Chick-fil-A operates is you are actually not an owner of that business, you are kind of a managing partner, and you don't own that Chick-fil-A franchise. The way that it works is that, first of all, whenever you want to become a Chick-fil-A franchisee, you can't just apply and then be accepted into the franchise program like you can with so many other brands. You have to go through this extremely strenuous application process, and then you get put on a waiting list because Chick-fil-A only opens a certain number of locations per year. And there are a lot of people on that waiting list, meaning that if you get accepted into the franchise program, you won't be good to go to open a location. You will just be good to go to enter that waiting list. The other thing is that Chick-fil-A is highly competitive, meaning that if you are somebody that doesn't have a connection with Chick-fil-A, if you didn't work for Chick-fil-A, or if you don't have experience with the Chick-fil-A, then chances are you probably will not be accepted into the franchise program. For me personally, whenever I've spoken to a lot of different Chick-fil-A owners, almost all of them started off as GMs and then became Chick-fil-A owners. They didn't just enter the system from nowhere. The other thing that's interesting about Chick-fil-A is their franchise structure as a whole. Typically with franchising, how it works is you pay a franchise fee, and then that gives you the right to enter the brand and use trademarked and copyrighted materials. Once you are a franchisee, you then have to pay to build out the space, you have to pay to finish out the space, you have to pay to do everything. And whenever your store is operating, you simply pay a royalty fee and an advertising fee to the franchisor. This can vary from 6% of sales to 8% of sales. It really depends on the brand. With Chick-fil-A, you pay a franchise fee, And then that gives you access to the brand. And then Chick-fil-A will actually pay for the build out of the space. They'll pay to finish out the space. They'll kind of pay for everything. And then you operate it from there. But the difference here is that whenever you go with a traditional franchise, you own that business from there on out. But whenever you go with a Chick-fil-A, you don't actually own that Chick-fil-A. You are simply an operating partner of that Chick-fil-A. And Chick-fil-A is now going to take out a huge chunk of all of your profit, and they're going to pocket that, and then you get to keep the rest. With Chick-fil-A also, if you are a owner-operator with the brand and you decide that you want to retire or you want to move, and as a result you can no longer own your Chick-fil-A, you cannot simply sell that Chick-fil-A. Instead, you just give up your right as the owner. Chick-fil-A takes it over and they find a new franchisee. So with Chick-fil-A, and as far as franchising goes, it really is kind of an entirely different business model. And with Chick-fil-A, you're almost buying yourself a job, and it can be a very high paying job, but it's a job nonetheless. Whereas with other franchises, you are typically buying yourself an investment, and kind of the thought process with the both of them are very different. If I wanted to be an absentee owner that eventually wanted to own 50, 60 franchises, I would not want to go the route of Chick-fil-A, because Chick-fil-A wants people that are going to be in their locations, operating their locations, keeping a close eye on their locations. Whereas traditional franchises like McDonald's or Taco Bell or KFC, for example, they are more okay with that multi-unit absentee owner style of management. All in all though, if you're somebody who is interested in exploring the franchise industry, I would highly recommend that you, one, do your research. Two is to contact all franchisees that are currently in the franchise system. You can find this information through the FDD, or the franchise disclosure document. And I would also encourage you to go and visit as many locations in person as possible and to figure out if this is something that you could see yourself doing day in and day out. Franchising is a really great way to go about owning a business and to go about finding success with a seemingly low upfront investment. But the fact is that it is a lot of work and it isn't for everyone. So it's really important to do your due diligence before you become a franchisee. All in all though, I do want to reiterate that this is my personal opinion on franchising and the things that you should know. I'm not giving you formal professional franchise advice. This is for entertainment purposes only, and I am not a lawyer or franchise attorney or any of those things. So make sure to consult a true professional before you sign up for a franchise. But with that being said, you guys, I would love to hear your thoughts on this video, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. And I will see you guys in the next video.